Sagittarius, I'll reveal the name of the mother and daughter who have your photo on an altar. Have you ever walked away from someone, only to feel like a part of you was still stuck there, unseen, unheard, and strangely held back? Maybe it shows up in your body. A tightness in your chest when you're about to take a risk. A fatigue that doesn't match your activity. Or dreams that don't feel like your own. You've done the work. You've let go, moved on, rebuilt. And yet something lingers. Something invisible that tugs at your energy when no one else is looking. If that sounds familiar, I want you to know you're not imagining things. You're not weak. You're not broken. What you're sensing might be a spiritual imprint. A kind of energetic tie. And today, I want to gently open that door with you. Welcome to Zodiac Wisdom. My name is Sophia. I'm not just an astrologer. I'm someone who's walked this path with thousands of souls just like you. People who seemed fine on the outside, but carried something ancient, unseen, and heavy inside. This is a safe space for healing, insight, and real conversations. So if your heart feels even a small yes right now, I invite you to take one simple step. Subscribe to the channel, share this message with someone who might need it, and stay with me. You don't have to figure this out alone, because what we're about to explore isn't superstition. It's not drama. It's a deeply personal story of how energy moves through love, memory, and silence. And how sometimes the ones who say they love us the most are the very ones who keep us trapped in an old version of ourselves. Today we'll talk about the invisible altar. A mother and a daughter who held on to your image, not out of respect but out of need, out of control, out of fear of losing the light that is you. And most importantly, we'll walk through the exact steps to reclaim your energy, your name, and your future. Stay with me until the end, because the final chapter holds something I believe your soul has been waiting to hear for a very long time. Something that will not only make sense of what you've been feeling, but might just shift the direction of your journey from this moment forward. And as we begin, I want to ask you gently and honestly, what is it that you're finally ready to put down? What silent burden have you carried long enough? Leave a comment below. Whether it's a name, a memory, or a feeling, you don't need to explain it. Just write it down. Sometimes that's how the healing begins. Let's take the first step together. You're not behind. You're right on time. And everything in you is ready now. Chapter 1: The Silent Binding. When love turns to control. Sagittarius, for a soul like yours, born under the sign of expansion, truth, and fierce independence, there is perhaps no deeper wound than being bound by love. Not love in its purest form, but a version of love twisted by control, by fear, by emotional debt. Over the years, I've worked with so many Sagittarius women who carry this very ache. They don't talk about it often. In fact, they usually don't even have words for it. But it shows up in the way they hesitate before saying what they truly want. It reveals itself in their pattern of overgiving, in the way they make themselves smaller so someone else can feel bigger. And more than anything, it shows up in their confusion, wondering why they still feel tied to someone who once said, "I love you," but made them feel anything but free. This chapter is not about blame. It's about recognition. Because you cannot break free from a chain you refuse to see. Let me tell you a story about Amanda, a Sagittarius woman in her early 50s, a brilliant freelance designer, mother of 2, and one of the most vibrant energies I've ever met. She came to me not because she felt lost, but because she felt stuck. Like her life had plateaued. Despite her efforts to grow, to change, to heal, she kept hitting an invisible wall, especially in relationships. Every time she tried to open her heart, something within her would shut down. It was like her soul remembered a rule she could no longer name. As we worked together, a memory surfaced. A conversation she once had with her late mother, one that had echoed quietly in her decisions for decades. Her mother had said, "You have a wild heart, Amanda. If you're not careful, it will get you hurt." Sounded like protection, felt like love, but it planted a seed. A message: freedom is dangerous. Your nature is too much. You must contain it to be loved. Amanda had been carrying that message like a silent binding. And it wasn't just words. It was energy. Her mother, though well-intentioned, had wrapped her in invisible threads: expectations, guilt, emotional loyalty. Amanda had placed her own freedom on an altar, unknowingly bowing to an old story. This is what I call the altar you never chose. Can come from a mother, a sister, a lover, a best friend, someone you once trusted, someone who may have once cared deeply for you. But when you began to outgrow the version of you they were comfortable with, something shifted. They didn't try to celebrate your becoming. They tried to contain it. Sagittarius, this is the shadow side of relationships that aren't born in freedom. You are a fire sign, ruled by Jupiter, the planet of expansion. You are not meant to shrink. And yet, when someone tries to love you by binding you to their expectations, it leaves a residue in your energy field. A kind of spiritual cage that doesn't lock with bars, but with memory, emotion, and unspoken obligation. You may have left the relationship. You may have moved far away. You may have built a new life. But energetically, the altar still exists. Somewhere, consciously or not, someone may still be holding on to your image, your energy, your story. And if you're not aware of it, part of you might still be responding. So how do you know if you're still bound? You'll notice it when you try to speak your truth and your throat tightens. You'll feel it when you want to take a leap, but self-doubt creeps in from nowhere. You'll hear it in your own voice when you say, "I don't want to disappoint them," even though they haven't been in your life for years. You'll sense it in dreams, in fatigue, in a subtle anxiety that follows your joy like a shadow. This is not about superstition. This is soul psychology. This is energy. And the most painful part? Sometimes these bindings come from people who never meant to harm us. They loved us in the only way they knew. But love without awareness becomes control. And Sagittarius, you were not born to be controlled. You were born to teach others what it means to love without holding, to walk beside someone without needing to hold the reins. Amanda's healing didn't happen overnight, but the first shift came when she finally named the altar. She wrote down the names. Her mother, her ex-husband, a cousin who always told her she was too loud, too independent, too impulsive. She didn't write them down in anger. She wrote them down in truth. Then she whispered, "I call my soul back. I am not yours to contain. I am not here to fulfill your story. I release your image of me, and I reclaim my own." And you know what happened? She cried. She laughed. And for the first time in years she painted again. Not because she had to, but because she wanted to. Sagittarius, the moment you name what has been binding you, is the moment your fire begins to rise again. You don't need to fight anyone. You don't need to explain yourself. You only need to say, "I no longer live in that version of me." And from that moment the altar begins to fall. In the next chapter we'll go even deeper into the emotional debt that keeps so many strong, brilliant Sagittarius women stuck in guilt and silence. It's time we talk about why you stayed so long, and how to lovingly walk away from what was never truly yours. But for now, take a breath. You're already doing the work, and you are not alone in this. Chapter 2. The Emotional Debt. Why you stayed so long. Sagittarius, you are the seeker of freedom, the philosopher of the zodiac, the wild-hearted soul who is always reaching for the horizon. But let's be honest, sometimes even the wildest spirit stays too long in a place that no longer feels like home. Why? Because emotional debt is real. And it's one of the most misunderstood reasons we stay in relationships, families, or roles that shrink us. I want to talk to the part of you that gave and gave long after it stopped feeling safe. The part that smiled through silence, that stayed in the room out of politeness, that didn't speak up because you didn't want to make anyone else uncomfortable. That version of you wasn't weak. She was conditioned to believe that love means loyalty, even when it hurts. That to walk away would mean betrayal. And for Sagittarius, whose moral compass is so deeply rooted in justice and honor, that kind of emotional math is almost impossible to ignore. Let me tell you about Lorraine, a Sagittarius client of mine who worked as a small business owner in Florida. In her early 40s, successful, radiant, and deeply compassionate. But when she came to me, she had just ended a friendship of over 20 years with someone she considered her soul sister. Lorraine told me, "I don't know why this hurts so much. She used me, Sophia. She manipulated me for years. But now that it's over, I'm the one crying. I'm the one feeling guilty." I asked her, "What do you think you owe her?" She was silent. And then she said, "I think I owe her the version of me that she helped build. I feel like without her I wouldn't be who I am. And leaving feels like tearing up the foundation of my own life." That's emotional debt. It's the belief that because someone was there for us, once, maybe even for years, We owe them our continued silence, our continued presence, our continued sacrifice. It's especially hard for Sagittarius women, because you are naturally optimistic. You focus on the good. You say, maybe I'm overreacting. You search for the meaning in pain instead of simply acknowledging the pain. But here's the truth. You do not owe your light to the people who kept you in the dark. Yes, some people were there for us when we were vulnerable, but presence is not the same as love. Help is not the same as healing. And just because someone walked beside you in a hard season, doesn't mean they earned the right to walk into every chapter of your future. This is where spiritual growth becomes radical. When you realize that gratitude does not equal obligation, you can thank someone for what they gave you, and still walk away when they begin to take more than they return. Lorraine's story unraveled over several sessions. As she traced the timeline, she realized her friend had always played the rescuer role. Always there when Lorraine needed comfort, but also always making Lorraine feel indebted. Remember when I did this for you? You wouldn't be here without me. Don't forget who believed in you first. It sounds supportive, doesn't it? But underneath it was a subtle manipulation, a way to ensure Lorraine never truly outgrew her, never challenged her, never left her. Sagittarius, your fire makes people feel alive. Your belief in others can be addictive, but not everyone loves you because of who you are. Some love you because of what your energy gives them. When those people sense that you're pulling back, even just a little, when you set a boundary, say no, take space, they don't see it as growth. They see it as betrayal. And that's when the guilt sets in. But here's what I want you to remember. Guilt is not the same as wrongdoing. Guilt is often the echo of old conditioning. And sometimes the person you're trying so hard not to hurt isn't even thinking about your well-being at all. You stayed so long not because you were blind, but because you were loyal. You stayed because you believed in second chances. You stayed because someone once told you that walking away was failure, and you internalized that. But Sagittarius, leaving isn't failing. Leaving is honoring the truth that your soul has outgrown a space where it once had to shrink just to survive. In this moment, I want you to write down this truth, somewhere safe, somewhere visible. I can be grateful and still let go. You don't owe anyone the old version of you. You don't owe anyone an explanation for choosing peace. And you definitely don't owe anyone your silence, just to keep the illusion of harmony. Lorraine eventually wrote her friend a letter. She didn't send it. She didn't need to. The act of writing was enough. In that letter she said, I honor everything we were, but I no longer sacrifice myself for who you need me to be. She folded that letter, burned it, and then, for the first time in years, she went to the ocean alone and didn't feel afraid of being misunderstood. Sagittarius, if you've stayed too long in a connection that no longer nourishes your truth, you are not behind. You are not broken. You are just ready. Ready to release the debt. Ready to reclaim your voice. Ready to be free. In the next chapter, we'll walk into that freedom together. Through a healing ritual that doesn't require incense, altars, or approval. Just your truth. And a willingness to begin again. Take your time. Sit with what surfaced. And if something in this chapter resonated with you, leave a comment below. Your words might be the lifeline someone else needs tonight. Chapter 3, Reclaiming Your Fire. The Ritual of Return. Sagittarius, there's a moment in every healing journey when reflection is no longer enough. When insight has run its course and what you need most is action. A sacred act. Not to prove anything to the world, but to yourself. That you are ready to return. Not to someone, not to a place, but to the core of who you are. Because the truth is, you never lost your fire. It was never extinguished. Only buried, dimmed, or diverted into keeping others warm while you stood in the cold. You've always known your way back. But you may have needed someone to whisper, it's safe now. You can come home. So let me be that voice for you today. I've shared this ritual with many Sagittarius women over the years, from single mothers to retired nurses, from artists to business owners. And I've watched something beautiful unfold each time. A soft unraveling of guilt, followed by a rising clarity they didn't know they still had access to. This is not a ritual of complexity. It doesn't require incense, temples, or spiritual tools you don't resonate with. What it asks of you is truth, sincerity, and a moment of presence. Here is how you begin. Find a quiet space. Doesn't need to be perfect. Just yours. A room, a porch, a parked car, anywhere you can sit with yourself uninterrupted for a few minutes. Place in front of you a white candle, symbolizing your inner clarity, a clear glass of water to reflect your soul's truth, a small pinch of sea salt, a leaf or a natural object, anything that connects you back to the earth. Sit comfortably. Place your hands over your heart. Close your eyes and breathe in deeply. Exhale slowly. Do this 3 times. Then speak, not loudly, not with force, but as if calling someone home from far away. I call my soul back to me. I release every image of me that no longer belongs. I cut every thread that held me for the comfort of others. I return to the fire I was born with. I rise for no one but myself. You may cry. You may not feel anything at first, but something in your energy will begin to shift. Because Sagittarius, rituals don't work because of what we use. They work because of how we mean it. If you want, take a piece of paper and write down the names of those you've outgrown, the versions of you that were shaped by guilt, fear, or silence, the roles you no longer wish to play. When you're done, you can tear the paper or burn it safely, offering the ash or pieces to the earth, a bowl of water, or simply letting it go into the wind. Let the elements witness your release. Then dip your fingers in the water and gently touch your forehead, your chest, your hands. These are not just gestures. They are reminders. You are clear, you are free, and you are whole. One of my favorite clients, a woman named Bernice, did this on her 60th birthday. After nearly 30 years of running her own cafe, raising her children, and caring for a husband who had passed away, she finally chose herself. She said, "I don't want to be anyone's lighthouse anymore. I want to be the flame." And she was. She closed her cafe 6 months later and opened an art studio, her lifelong dream. She now teaches painting to women over 50, guiding them not just to make art, but to reclaim the parts of themselves they were told were impractical, too emotional, or not useful. Sagittarius, you are the flame too. You don't need to be the strong one for everyone else anymore. You don't need to carry guilt as currency. You don't need to earn your right to peace. This ritual, this moment, it's yours. Not to erase the past, but to honor the present. To say, I am no longer waiting for someone to give me permission. I am the permission. And if you feel like your light has dimmed, remember embers still burn, and fire returns the moment we give it breath. In the next chapter, we'll talk about what happens when the past comes back. When someone knocks again, softly, hoping the door will still open. I'll show you how to recognize obsession disguised as reconciliation, and how to stay in your power without guilt, fear, or apology. But for now, take a moment to breathe and maybe light that candle. Your fire is not just returning. It never left. And if you tried the ritual or you plan to, let us know in the comments. Share your experience. You never know who's reading, silently praying for the courage to do the same. Chapter 4. Recognizing the return. When the past comes knocking. Sagittarius, there's something you must know before we go further. Not everyone who returns does so because they love you. Some come back because they sense your light returning. Some come back not because they regret hurting you, but because they feel your energy slipping out of their control. Some come back because they cannot bear the idea that you no longer need them, and they knock softly, not with force, not with accusations, but with carefully chosen words. A casual message, a memory, a photo from the past, just checking in. I saw this and thought of you. I miss our talks. They don't scream, they whisper. But Sagittarius, you are wiser now. You know the difference between connection and possession, between love and attachment, and it is time to trust what your intuition has been trying to tell you all along. Let me tell you a story about Marina, a Sagittarius woman in her mid-40s who reached out to me after 6 years of silence from her ex-partner. He was her first love, the one who always left just enough hope to keep her waiting. She said, "Sophia, it's like he knew I was finally doing better. He messaged me the day I signed the lease to my new house. I hadn't heard from him in years. Why now?" I told her, "Because your energy just broke free. And some people can sense when their hold on you is fading. Sagittarius, you are ruled by Jupiter. Your energy is vast, magnetic, hard to forget. And when someone has once relied on your warmth to feel powerful, they feel the cold when you finally take that warmth back." Marina's story is not uncommon. She said he seemed changed, more mature, apologetic, and he might have been. But as we unpacked their history, it became clear. Every time she had started to move forward, he would return, not to grow with her, but to reattach himself to her light. His words were sweet, but they always circled back to guilt. I was never the same without you. I think of you every day. I messed up, but I know we're meant to be. Sagittarius, here's what I want you to understand. Love does not need to bind you to be real. It does not need guilt, apology, or old wounds to survive. When someone returns and they need you to remember the pain, or they rely on your empathy to reopen a door you closed for good reason, that is not love. That is emotional reattachment. That is control disguised as reconciliation. So how do you recognize if this return is genuine or manipulative? You'll know it in your body. If your heart races not with excitement but confusion, that's a sign. If you feel emotionally foggy instead of grounded, that's a sign. If their presence pulls you back into a version of yourself you've outgrown, that's a sign. Sagittarius, you've done too much work to fall back into the same cage wearing a different coat of paint. Here's a simple truth I tell all my Sagittarius clients. If someone needs you to shrink in order to love you, they don't deserve your love. And you may still care about them. You may still wish them well. But that doesn't mean you need to open the door again. Sometimes the most powerful act of love is not welcoming someone back, but choosing to bless them from afar, while protecting your space. Marina chose not to reply, not with coldness, but with clarity. She lit a candle, placed her hand on her heart and whispered, "I forgive you, but I do not invite you back." And then she danced, alone, in her kitchen, with music on, because for the first time, she realized her life didn't need his presence to feel complete. Her joy didn't need his permission. Sagittarius, this is what healing looks like. Not a dramatic confrontation, but a quiet knowing that you no longer live where they last left you. If someone from your past reappears, ask yourself, do I feel safe and expanded in their presence, or small and uncertain? Do I trust myself more around them, or do I begin to second guess? Do they love who I've become, or are they trying to resurrect who I used to be? You don't need to answer right away. Just observe. Listen to yourself. And if you choose not to respond, not to re-engage, that is your power. That is your right. You are not being cold. You are being clear. In the next chapter, we'll move beyond the cycle of reaction. We'll talk about how to embody your full Sagittarius fire again. Without fear, without apology, without shrinking. You are no longer the version they once controlled. You are no longer the silence they depended on. You are the choice they never thought you'd make. And now you are free. If this chapter brought someone to mind, or stirred something you've been afraid to name, write it in the comments below. Even just an initial, a word, a moment, because naming it is the beginning of releasing it. You are rising, Sagittarius. And the past can only follow if you allow it to. Chapter 5, Stepping into the New Light. The Victory of Your Soul. Sagittarius, this is the moment you've been walking toward all along. Not with noise, not with fury, but with grace, with clarity, with the quiet, sacred knowing that you are no longer who you once were. You've looked at the altar. You've seen the names, the shadows, the silent bindings. You've walked through guilt, through memory, through the whispers of voices that once convinced you to stay small. You stayed longer than you should have. You loved deeper than you were loved back. And you forgave more than was ever apologized for. And yet you are here. Still open. Still hopeful. Still strong. Sagittarius, your soul has just crossed a threshold. And though no trumpet sounded, no sky split open, the shift has already occurred. Your vibration is different now. The choices you make from this moment on will not be born of fear or guilt, but from truth and sovereignty. Because the truth is, you are not someone who needs to be rescued. You are the one who rescues yourself. You are not someone who was left behind. You are the one who chose to rise. Let me tell you about Iris, a Sagittarius woman I worked with just last year. She was 62, a former school teacher now retired. Her children had grown and moved away. Her marriage had ended long ago. And for the first time in decades, she had the silence to finally hear her own voice again. She came to me not broken, but searching. "Sophia," she said, "I feel like I missed my moment, like I gave it all away. my fire, my youth, my time. And now that I finally want something for myself, I don't even know where to start. I told her, you start right here. Not by doing, but by remembering. You are not late. You are arriving. We built her a ritual, not with candles or chants, but with choices. Every morning she wrote down one thing she wanted, not what she thought was acceptable, not what others expected, but what she wanted. And every night, she took one small action toward that desire. In 6 months, she had written the first 10 chapters of her memoir. A book she never thought she was worthy of sharing. But her story was powerful, just like yours. Sagittarius, your fire is returning not to burn the past, but to illuminate the future. You don't need to be loud to be unstoppable. You don't need revenge to be whole. You don't need anyone to validate your journey. You walk through it. That's all the proof you need. This is your victory, not the loud kind, but the kind that lets you sleep deeply at night. The kind that helps you laugh without second-guessing. The kind that no one can take away because it was never given to you by anyone else. You built this. You rose. And now you lead. So what does life look like from here? It looks like choosing peace, even when chaos knocks again. It looks like honoring your no as sacred, just as your yes has always been. It looks like loving with openness, but never at the expense of your own light. It looks like finally being the version of yourself you used to dream about when you thought no one else was watching. Sagittarius, you are not who they remember. You are not who you were at your lowest. You are not what they hope to keep on that altar. You are reborn, not in body but in spirit. And now the world must meet you again. So I ask you softly and seriously, who are you becoming now? What are you ready to claim? What part of your fire are you ready to share? Not out of duty, but out of desire. Write it in the comments below. Declare it, because every time you name your new self, you make it more real. And when another Sagittarius reads it, they might feel just brave enough to name theirs too. We are building a new map together. One where the past is honored but not obeyed. One where your energy is no longer traded for affection. One where you walk forward not to escape but to expand. This isn't the end of your journey. It's the return. To yourself. To your essence. To your joy. Not the old joy that asks for permission, but the kind that dances without explanation. If you've been with me through all these chapters, thank you. You didn't just listen. You showed up. For yourself. For your healing. And if you take nothing else from this journey, let it be this. You are not behind. You are right on time. And the version of you that was once held back, she's free now. Because you set her free. So go. Live louder. Love braver. And let no one ever dim you again. The universe isn't waiting to rescue you. It's watching you lead. Ending wrap-up. Sagittarius, you've just completed a journey that not everyone dares to take. You've looked inward. You've listened deeply. And above all, you've chosen yourself again and again in silence, in ritual, in truth. You are not just a survivor of the past. You are the author of what comes next. You've reclaimed your fire. You've forgiven without forgetting. You've stepped off the altar and into the light of your own making. Now I want to hear from you. What part of your soul did you find in this journey? What moment in these chapters spoke directly to your heart? Leave a comment below. Share a word, a sentence, a story. Doesn't have to be perfect, just has to be yours. Because in this space, your voice matters. And when one Sagittarius speaks their truth, it gives permission for another to do the same. And if you're new here, or you've been quietly listening for a while, I invite you truly to stay. This isn't just a video. This is a sanctuary for souls like yours. Subscribe to the channel because we're not finished yet. We've only just begun. In the coming episodes, we'll explore more of what it means to love without fear, to walk away without shame, and to live with unshakable freedom. So if you are a Sagittarius, or you love someone who is, welcome home. There is so much more ahead for you. And always remember, you are not too late. You are not too much. You are exactly what the universe hoped you would become. Stay bold, stay kind, and never stop expanding.